Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Sangha Ocean Beach. I'm Brother Dave. I'm so happy you're here. Special welcome to anybody who doesn't regularly sit with us and who's here for our first of a two-part series we're going to be covering called Practices for Lightness. So special welcome to first-timers. Well, as we do, let's begin at the beginning. All right, let's begin with a sit. We can blow the stop sign to get to the yoga class on time, and that's our nature, right? We get excited. I'm a man of great enthusiasm. This is a good thing. But our Sangha is not just here as a wonderful and nourishing gathering place. It's not just here as a place where we can teach each other, although it is those things as well. But primarily, the Sangha is a place of practice. The Sangha is a place of practice. It's an opportunity for us to come together in a very safe space every week and train. In shamatha and vipassana, as meditation is sometimes summarized. Shamatha meaning to stop, and vipassana meaning to deeply look. So we always begin with some stopping and some deep looking. So let's find first our physical, comfortable seat. We're going to have like maybe a 5-minute sit together. So not that long. For me, I usually start by wiggling around and just investigating where my body is. If I've been busy up until now, I might not know that my low back has tightened or that my knee is sore. It requires a little bit of self-inquiry first. And I usually do that just by wiggling around, which also encourages me not to pretend that I am a statue. And that in order to be mindful that I need to get into the exact same position every single time. Sometimes I can't do that. Sometimes that doesn't feel good. And then once I've wiggled around and listened to myself, then I can start to settle in, right? To make those movements smaller. The final adjustment to the piece of tech. Grabbing the blanket that I realize now I need. All the while, I am giving myself time and permission and space to let the snow globe settle. Just letting the snow globe settle. And then when my body is relatively still, knowing that I can adjust during the 5-minute sit if I need to, I will just make that the object of my concentration for the moment that I have to adjust my foot that's falling asleep. But once my body is as settled as it's gonna get, then I want to bring my awareness a step deeper inside to my intentions. Why am I sitting here like this? Am I just taking a rest? Or is there something more? For me, that means that I want to stop liking and disliking, agreeing and disagreeing. As much as I can, I want to put those thoughts down. They are a veil between me and my actual experience of reality. So as much as I can, I want to keep bringing my attention back like a flashlight, over and over again. Back to the here and the now. And so from here forward, my voice, the sounds of the bells that we'll hear, are all there for that purpose. Just as a reminder, like an echo. Calling your attention back from the story, from the past and the future. Bringing our attention back to right here, right now. Be gentle with yourself. You can even smile to remind yourself that our practice can be enjoyed. Breathing in, I am aware of my body. Breathing out, I smile, accepting any communication my body is giving me. My body can feel any way it wants to feel right now. In, aware of body. Out, accepting body. Breathing in, I am aware that I am breathing in. Breathing out, I am aware that I am breathing out. In, out. Noticing the wandering mind. Gently but firmly, countless thousands of times. Bringing my mind back from its story, its thoughts and distraction, to breathing in, I am aware that I am breathing in. Breathing out, I am aware that I am breathing out. Breathing in, I am aware of my feelings, my emotional body. Breathing out, I accept my feelings. It is okay to feel anything I am feeling right now. In, aware of feelings. Out, accepting feelings. Breathing in, we have arrived. Breathing out, we are home. In, arrived. Out, home. Thank you, friends. Feel free to stretch out and unwind, massage yourselves. That was less than 10 minutes. I like to check in with that because it's easy to create a false friction between myself and regular practice and imagine that it takes a lot of extra time. I can certainly put a lot of time into it if I want to, but I don't have to. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, turn me around in my day. And of course, that dedicated practice, meaning practice done at a certain time and in a certain way, maybe wearing certain clothes in a special place, right? Dedicated practice, it's just there to remind me that I want to be in my integrated practice all day long. So let's not forget that either. Right? We sit like this in the perfect environment, right? With the support of Sangha, of community, of family. Many beautiful translations for that word, Sangha. I like to say it's family. So we sit together as a family, right, in this perfect setting, so that we can train ourselves for those 10 minutes to make it easier to be mindfully doing the dishes when the phone rings. Right? To be integrating our mindfulness practice into the other 23 hours of the day. So thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your practice. I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. Special welcome to those of you that might be new or that don't always sit with Sangha Ocean Beach on a Sunday. Thanks for being here. I'm excited for the first of our two-part series on practices for lightness. Practices for lightness. Everywhere I go, every group that I teach right now has some version of the same question, right? Some version of the same problem we want to solve, right? Like, it could be worded like, how are we supposed to practice in all of this chaos right now? Because unless you're, living in a cave, which you may be, and power to you, the world feels very topsy-turvy and chaotic, uncertain. The military acronym for it is VUCA. I was in the Marine Corps many moons ago as a very young man, and we used to call it VUCA. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This is always the nature of our planet, but it's more obvious now for some of us than perhaps it has been. I can speak for myself and say, yeah, it feels right up in my face. It feels right here. Some of the stuff that's going on internationally. And that coupled with the amount of access that I have to it. with the supercomputer I carry in my pocket, more likely, more honestly, in my hand. I don't know how much time it sees in my pocket, right? So in the face of that, and having answered that question many times over the last year, I decided to try to boil down some of my ideas around it. And where I landed was that there are ways to interface with the world right now that can feel very heavy, almost cripplingly so at times, in my experience, particularly emotionally. And so what I really want, right, what I really want and think I might be able to affect is I'd like to feel some lightness. Right? I aspire to existing in this world as it is, and doing my part and doing my best to be a light in it. But wow, in order to do that, don't I need to be able to touch some lightness at least once in a while? And so over these next 2 weeks, I want to talk about what I mean by that and how I have and haven't been able to cultivate that. And some of the practices from the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, our teacher, who's a master at this, right? Because he came from a country that was besieged by war, even before the American and Vietnamese conflict. The 40s and 50s saw Vietnam ravaged by French colonization. So Thich Nhat Hanh, grew up almost his entire life, in war, like surrounded by war. And so he knew the importance of lightness and how it can clarify things and empower us greatly to take action against some of these horrors and injustices with which we might feel surrounded or besieged. Well, let me start with a story. So I've been practicing as a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's for over 20 years. And I started just by reading his books, and I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop. For those of you that have heard him speak or have read his books, you may have had a similar experience. There's something so compelling about his gift for combining the most profoundly deep teachings in such a easy, breezy, poetic way. He can make the most complex things so simple. And so every book I read, I felt like, oh my God, I would put it down. And I said, if I even tried to practice just some of the things in that book, it would change my whole life. Like I would have to change so many things, And this is what I was looking for. And so after some years like that, kind of trying it on my own, finally, I buckled down, I broke down because in spite of my uniforms, my military uniform, and now I'm wearing the jacket that signifies being a disciple of Thich Nhat Hanh. In spite of all these clubs I'm joining and all these uniforms I assume to wear, I'm actually kind of a loner. So it took me a while to sort of break down and say, like, okay, I think I've gone as far as I can go just reading. Let me get a taste of what this practice really looks like. And so I went up to the monastery. I'm from New York City, and so I was on the East Coast at the time. So the monastery then was in Vermont, in these beautiful maple forests in Vermont. And there was maybe 6 or 7 of us there for a week of retreat, nothing big. It was off season. And the orientation, the introductory talk, so the first time I'm being given like a in-person teaching by this school, it was given by the head nun at the monastery at that time, Sister Annabelle Laity. I did not know this at that time, but she is one of our most senior monastics. It'd be like saying, like, oh yeah, I went to this, convent that I'd never been to, and this nun, Mother Teresa, like gave us a talk, invited us in, but I didn't realize that at the time, that she was such a celebrity and was in fact the person behind translating many of the classics of Thich Nhat Hanh's that we have in English were translated from the Vietnamese by Sister Annabelle. She's an English scholar of linguistics, has been a nun for, 40 years or something like that. So she gave the introductory talk to this week of practice. I got very lucky. And at the end, after she just went through the basics, of walking meditation and eating meditation and sitting meditation, for less than an hour, at the end she took some questions. And one of the women in the room asked the question about practicing with mindfulness of the news, and even asked Sister Annabelle very specifically, like, do you consume any news? And if so, like how much? And how do you manage this? And so this topic that we're sitting with today was introduced to me 20 years ago. And it felt just as relevant then as it does now. I had, not that long been out of the military and, was kind of deciding myself about how I wanted to relate to the information of the news. Sister Annabelle's answer started with a smile. She kind of smiled and sort of sat back a little, and she looked at us and she said, "Oh, yes. I make sure to consume at least 5 minutes of news every month." And the whole room laughed. I laughed. And after she let us have our laugh, she explained. She was like, well, here in the monastery, there is no violence. There is no poverty. There's no hunger. She said, so I like to listen to the news once a month, but just for 5 minutes, just to remind me that all of that suffering is out there in the world. She's like, it's always the same thing, It doesn't really change in content, does it? It's hurting people. And she says, and I do find it beneficial to be reminded occasionally that that's going on and that it's so pervasive. It inspires me, to reignite my practice of love and compassion and my deep heart's intention to help other people practice and interact from a place of love and understanding. She said, but I don't like to get bogged down, in the details of it. This was her answer. And I'll tell you, when I heard this, a little over 20 years ago, I was kind of horrified. I felt like, at the time, I felt like I was being given something unrealistic that didn't apply to my life. It didn't apply to my life. And in part, of course, because I was looking at this nun who was living in a cloister and had, a whole different opportunity to take a step back from the news. Like, she wasn't checking email every day and things like that. But now, in hindsight, and the reason I start with this story about Sister Annabelle is I can see that she was only able to do that precisely because she was practicing so intensely. She only had the personal power and the freedom to interact with the news in such a way that was healthy for her, to maintain healthy boundaries between herself and the news. And she only had that power because she was practicing so diligently. And, of course, as well as being in the support of a practice community, right? In her case, a cloister, but we're experiencing the support of a practice community right now, right? In the form of a lay Sangha. Just in the same way, I would not come home from work every night and drink a 6-pack of beer and not expect to get drunk, right? And ultimately to feel poorly. Just the way that would be ludicrous, so it is for me to expect that I can, finish my day every day, or even worse, begin my day every day by ingesting a ton of toxic, violent, despairing, traumatizing news. So for me, this idea of like how we as practitioners can interact with how crazy things is, it has to start there. Now, of course, I'm not saying don't consume any news. That's not what I'm saying. Because I realize for most of us, myself included, that's almost impossible. It's coming at us, from all sides, right? It's embedded in everything. We're all, connected to these screens, partly because of the way our society and economy is run now, partly because we're addicted to them. And those two things go hand in hand, right? Those two things are mutually supportive. Our economy is largely based on our attention deficit disorders and our screen addictions. And so I'm not even saying to not consume any news at all, but what I'm saying is at baseline, right? If I'm suffering in relation to what's going on in the world, this is the first place to look. Like, how much of that toxicity, how much of that violence, how much of that propaganda, quite frankly, because we know that the vast majority of our news sources are less than impeccable, right? They're corporatized and have, monetized ulterior motives. They're, being puppeteered a bit by the governments that they, are given exclusive access to, et cetera. Like, we know that some percentage of what we're, consuming and that's being called news is deceitful propaganda. So even when we're consuming it, we know, I can't 100% believe this ever. That would be unwise. And so, but yeah, right? We've been programmed to really, either, right? And this is what I meet. I meet people that are somewhere on a continuum. On the one hand, there's that person who's just completely overwhelmed by what's happening and how crazy the world is, and they've just stopped reading the news or watching the news or talking about the news at all. They're just like, I can't. And that person tends to feel really guilty about that. And so that's the suffering they're dealing with, right? They feel like, I'm a narcissist, I'm a bad citizen, what am I doing, right? This has been my experience. I've met a bunch of people on that end of the spectrum, but it's a continuum. And then on the other side, there are people who are just like, oh my God, I can't stop looking at it. Like, every bombing, every lie, every, murderous, genocidal, every negative thing. They're just soaking it in from when they wake up in the morning till when they go to bed at night. And of course, they're in their own suffering. Right? They're usually, when I talk to people that are at that end of the spectrum, they're very destabilized, right? And then they're going, and then in the middle, which is the majority of people, I see the majority of people alternating between the two, like turning hot, cold, They're taking in too much news until they can't anymore, until they just wake up and then they shut it all down. Okay, I'm taking a break from Facebook. You see it over and over and over again. So the first thing I want to say about this cycle is I want to totally normalize it, right? Wherever you are or have been on that emotional roller coaster, I invite you to forgive yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. It's okay. Believe me, I've been at every place on that map. And it's just because we're human beings. We weren't designed to have 24-hour a day, shiny, bright light, perfectly packaged, right, to be addictive and dopamine producing, quote unquote news, but really manipulative propaganda coming at us about 1 billion people, right, at all times. Right? That's just not how my brain, not how my central nervous system, not how my biology, not how my psychology was designed. That's not how we developed. We developed, we don't know exactly, but leading theories are that we spent the vast majority of, this animal being on the planet and looking like this, being a Homo sapien, that we spent the vast majority of that time outside in groups of about 150. Right, so living our entire lives, right, not getting any of this, right? But instead getting the news of the day, about how things were going and what people were doing in a circle of about 150 other humans. That's what we can handle, So once it goes to, 150 million or 7 billion, no wonder, right? We start to fry, we start to frazzle. We develop pains, we can get sick. That's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on our system anywhere the system is cracked, anywhere we might have some weakness or vulnerability or a trigger, it will be exacerbated. So once I've gotten to that place, right, where I've looked at the landscape and said, holy cow, so I'm, 99.6% biologically a chimpanzee, but I'm running around with this supercomputer. I can't stop looking at it, and almost everything on there is telling me that something is wrong, right? Because we're hardwired with negativity bias, right? Part of our makeup biologically in our brain and our central nervous system is to be seeking the problem and trying to fix it at all times. So if I want to keep your attention, right, because that makes me money or because that gives me political influence or whatever, then I'm going to just keep putting negative things, problems up in front of you because your brain wants that, right? Your brain is feeling affirmed in that moment. It's like, just like I was saying, everything's wrong. We have a part of that in us. That voice in us is very strong. Very strong. And so we're vulnerable to it. And so we have to take a step back first and just normalize this whole paradigm that we're inside of and just forgive ourselves. If you feel that you're guilty because you haven't been following the news, if you're totally burned out because you've been following it so much, wherever you're at, it's okay. It's okay. And then the next thing I invite us to do is to look again at Sister Annabelle, right? How again did she have all this power, all this equanimity, all this freedom? Partly why she had it is because she wasn't waiting until she opened a supercomputer and looked at, pictures of war in real time before she started practicing, before she started training. Right? She was training all day long. All day long. Right? And this is where mindfulness gives us a bit of leverage, right? Because I cannot expect to bring lightness, openness, an idea of acceptance and inquiry that avoids shame and blame and a narrow-minded attachment to view. And I cannot expect to bring this very open heart to the most triggering thing I've seen all year coming at me through my phone. If I have not been bringing that kind of openness, that kind of inquiry, that kind of non-judgmental attachment to my views, to my whole day before it, to my life as much as I possibly can. And so the first answer that mindfulness gives us is by the time you're, lying in bed with your head in your hands because of the news, it's too late. Right? We have to start training right now. We have to start training right now. Literally developing the muscles of resilience, equanimity, non-judgmental attention, right? Thoughtful, open-minded inquiry. And these tools we have to develop when the stakes are way lower, right? With our friends, on our own meditation cushions, in environments like this one, right? Practicing in the Sangha. And then we have some chance, right? When the world is right here in front of our faces and something horrible is happening in a place that we feel really connected to or to people that we love. And then and only then do we have the chance to be able to take a step back and breathe. And I'll leave you, next week we're going to go a bit deeper into how to take these practices out into the world and how to find balance between our peace activism and our desire for inner peace. But today I wanted to focus on our personal practice. And so I'm going to conclude my talk today with one of my favorite classic practices from the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. And it's a very simple question. Are you sure? Thich Nhat Hanh invites us, no matter what's going on, no matter how attached I am to the idea that like, oh, if so-and-so was president, it would be different. Or if so-and-so was governor, everything would be the other way, right? No matter how attached I get to my story, Thich Nhat Hanh invites us to ask the question, are you sure? And then immediately to give ourselves the answer, no. So the whole practice is, are you sure? No. Because we can never be sure. Right? We can never be 100% sure. I can only see the diamond on the table in the center of the room from where I'm standing. I cannot see all 360 degrees of it. I can never know the full backstory of what's taken place, the full history. I can never read the minds of the other people involved and know what they're, saying and how true it is and know what they're not saying. That's just not how it works. Right? We see reality, for better and for worse, through a cocktail straw. We have this very narrow, very limited experience. Just the way I can only see a tiny bit of the electromagnetic spectrum right now. I know the rest of it is there, but I can't detect it. This is how everything is. And so by asking ourselves, in a very dedicated way, mind you, as a practice, I recommend writing, are you sure? Printing it out and putting it somewhere you can see it all the time. I had one right in front of me at my work desk for years. Just a little 12 by 12 piece of paper that said, are you sure? And all day long I would look at it and I would remind myself, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And that didn't always change my view. That didn't always change my course of action, because sometimes I'm not sure, but I'm 90% or I'm very confident. And so I'm going to take the same action. I'm going to make the same choice. I'm going to hold the same view. But by reminding myself that I'm not 100% sure, I go from this, right? This is the inviter I use to invite the bell. I go from this, right, where it's really heavy and I'm really holding on to it. I'm kind of stuffing it in my mouth all day, to this, where I'm holding it in an open palm. It's still there, but I'm not sure about it. And so I'm holding it much more lightly, much more lightly. And that lightness, right, gives me a buoyed and increased capacity, right? That lightness, that freedom, right, of not being sure and knowing it, of rejoicing in it rather than maybe even bemoaning it and feeling insecure based on it, right? That counterintuitively empowering uncertainty that we lean into as Zen practitioners is an empowerment. It's a clarifier. It's a light in the dark. It's a light in the dark. And then, all of a sudden I have extra space. This thing that I've always looked at the same way, all of a sudden I can turn it upside down. Be like, well, what if the opposite was true? What would that be like? Are there elements of the opposite of my view that I can agree with or see merit in? And then if I can do that even a little bit inside, all of a sudden I have this exponentially greater capacity to communicate with other people, particularly other people with whom I disagree. But we'll get into that more next week. So the practice I leave you with is, are you sure? And the answer is always no. Thank you so much for listening, friends. I appreciate you. So now as we do, we're going to shift into a hybrid practice that is both an opportunity to share and or a chance for some Q&A. So in this sharing time, we maintain a few guidelines, and they're all in the interest of just keeping the space really safe. Normally we don't, on a regular Sunday, we don't record this portion of the Sangha, but today, because so many people want to watch this, these 2 weeks in recording from all around the world, we're going to be generous and we're going to record this portion for them so that they can practice along with us. But normally we do not. If something happens during this Q&A, like you ask a question of me and I answer and we have a back and forth that you feel after the fact is maybe too personal and you'd rather not have that in the recording, no problem. Just shoot me an email after this session and let me know that, and I'll very happy to edit it out. I can redact it very easily. And in advance, I thank you all for being on camera and for your generosity. We're practicing not just for ourselves right now, but for everybody who'll get to benefit from this discussion. If you'd like to share and or ask me a direct question, you just bow in. If you're on camera, you can wave me down. If you're off camera and would like to share via audio only, that's totally okay. And you can just use the Zoom interface to quote unquote raise hand. And then I'll know to unmute you. When you're sharing, you're invited to either ask me a direct question or otherwise to just address the entire group, just as I am now. We do not engage in crosstalk or conversation or advice giving between ourselves and the Sangha. Only if there's somebody teaching that day, they'll take direct questions. And today that's me. While that person is sharing and until they bow out or wave or just let us know verbally that they're done, the rest of us are in our own meditation. We're deeply, non-judgmentally listening. We've got an opportunity to train in what we've been talking about right here. Because my brain naturally has been socialized to be liking and disliking, agreeing and disagreeing, coming up with my own similar story, thinking of advice, a book I can recommend, right? Because we have something of that social responsibility in normal conversation. There's nothing wrong with that. But what happens is that if you never turn that off, you can end up listening with 80, 90% of your attention to that voice and not actually hear the speaker, not actually hear what the other person has to say. And so now, as we're all sitting listening to each person's share and their question, we have the opportunity to do the opposite. And to notice our thoughts, our meta-analysis, and to just keep putting them down over and over again. And just as we did back to our breathing, bring our attention back to the speaker. This is one of the ways that we can train ourselves to have a higher level of communication, especially when things are triggering or when there's disagreement, is to train ourselves to really listen. Really listen. So with that, the floor is open. Stacy, are you trying to unmute there? I see you at your computer. Yes? Okay. I'm inviting you to unmute. It's nice to start your share with your first name and where you're joining us from.
Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm here in San Diego. Wasn't sure about that real for a second there. I guess you've said so much so eloquently, and I get it. I get it. We can't know beyond a certainty of the doubt, and just about everything I can think of. Let alone things like these the elections that are coming up and everything. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. But I guess my it's not really a question, maybe a request, to just say more if you have anything, because I am in a personal crisis, trying to figure out how to live in this world. I disagree with so much, and there's so much in my life that hurts or needs attention, and I, it's just really, for me, it's very, very hard to live in this. There's nothing, there's no certainty, there's no real truth, so little truth in the world. Even I get overwhelmed just thinking about my mere little existence here, but the whole world is making decisions that we we just trust or we don't trust, but there's nothing to do about it, So it's just, I don't know. I just want to say I'm super glad to be here. I've anyway, sort of really wanted to say is that I'm really glad to be here and I appreciate all of you. Um, you know, I don't know. I don't know.
Thank you, Stacy. What a beautiful question. Asked and answered. Because the answer is to accept that we don't know. And how do we live in all of this uncertainty? How do we live with all this groundlessness? Like, forget the news and war and the economy. Like, we don't know every night when we go to bed if we're going to wake up the next day. Depending on our age and our relative health, we have a more or less expectation, but it's still, it's still that, right? It's still just our best guess. And there's two ways to look at that aspect of all of this, of our experience of reality. There's the really negative, kind of groundless, painful, frightening way, and that way is true. Like it can be really destabilizing and even despairing to just have to look in the mirror every day and be like, wow, the ancient Buddhist practice of the Five Remembrances. Like, I'm of a nature to grow old. I'm of a nature to get sick. I'm of a nature to die, and so forth. I read these to myself every morning. And yes, sometimes that doesn't feel good, right? Sometimes that hurts and can make me feel sad. Sometimes how powerless we really are, in the face of the warp and woof of it all, can, make me feel almost like nihilistic, like nothing matters. Absolutely. But on just the other side of that coin, right? And this is what we're going to talk about more next week, like how important it is for us to train ourselves to be able to hold things that appear as opposites, that appear as contradictions, but somehow are both simultaneously true. Reality is like this, but it's hard for our brains to hold. It causes us a lot of suffering. Right? And so on the other side of that coin of, let's call it groundlessness, right, the uncertainty and finiteness of life also makes it such a miracle, right? Would this have the kind of meaning to us that it has? Would it have the kind of beauty that being alive has if it never ended? I think, having really loved novels about vampires, and when that was popular for a while, I just found them so fascinating, But when I reflected more seriously about it, I was like, my God, I can't think of a worse torment than immortality. Right? Immortality really could lead to nihilism, right? Because if this wasn't so fleeting, could it possibly be so precious? And so you see how those two things are opposites, but they go together. They are both true. They're not exactly in opposition to one another, even though they're opposite truths. Right? There's a harmony to them. Just in the same way, Thich Nhat Hanh, our teacher, defines happiness, right? He doesn't define happiness as pleasure or joy or excitement. Right? He defines happiness as a coin, a two-sided coin. And on one side of the coin is that joy, that satisfaction, that excitement, that pleasure that we crave. But on the other side of that coin is suffering, is pain. And our teacher tells us to hold happiness as that coin held in balance. Right? And what does that mean? It means when the coin is suffering side up, to have the strength to continue. When this Coin is joy side up, to have the wisdom to savor. And that is the kind of control that we can exercise over this. We don't have any control over the ups and downs of the roller coaster. We don't know what's coming around the next bend. We've never been on this before, you know? And I can bemoan that, and sometimes I do, but I can also rejoice in it. I can also touch gratitude for how miraculous and real that makes my life. And how that alone can encourage me to want to feel my body in every breath of my waking day, to really be paying attention and not be lost in some stream of ads that's calling itself the news. Thanks, Stacy. I hope that helps. We have time for at least one more. Share if you'd like to share anything on about your practice in this area, or a question if you have a question for me. Don, I see your hand. I'm inviting you to unmute. It's nice to start your share with your first name and where you're joining us from.
This is Don, and I am in Conway, South Carolina. And I find reading the Five Remembrances very helpful at times, because what's left? And the answer is living the best I can, experiencing life the best I would know how, and enjoying it as much as I can, keeping all those five remembrances in mind at the same time. Don bowing out.
Thank you, Don. I'm inviting our next hand to unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone. This is Rob in Ocean Beach, California. Nice to be here with you all. I just want to make this quick. I heard recently a song lyric that really stuck out to me, and I don't know if it's an original lyric or attributed to somebody else. I didn't look it up, but it very well could be. And the lyric is, "The mystery of life isn't a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced." And for me, just sort of mulling that over, practicing that takes the pressure off of trying to figure out things, and just lets me sit back in the reality of, let's be mindful about our experiences and live our life that way. And so yeah, that lyric really stuck out to me recently, and I have been practicing with that, and it's helped me to hold things a little bit more lightly. And so I just want to thank you for your talk today, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, everyone. I think that's all the time we have for sharing and or questions today. Thank you all for your presence and your practice. One of the things that is so beautiful about practicing in Sangha, practicing in community as we're doing right now, practicing as a family, as I like to say, is you just literally can't do it alone. And so just by being here for each other, we're giving each other this gift that I find myself speechlessly grateful for week after week. So thank you for helping co-create this. We do it together. We do it together. I'll conclude with another practice of Thich Nhat Hanh's that I realized as people were sharing that might also go along with what we're talking about. It's another beautiful 3-word practice. This is it. This is it. And the idea of practicing with this is it is to neutralize the intensity of our experience, right? So something really amazing happens. You get that call, I got the job. And some part of yourself inside silently is saying, this is it. And then, you're driving around and you miss the perfect parking space or something negative happens, you get the email you don't want. And you say, This is it. This is it. That practice, the Five Remembrances, ends with a reminder that our actions are our only true possessions. That our actions are the ground upon which we stand. We make our lives. We produce our lives. Not perfectly, and not with complete control, not even close. But nobody has more control than us, right? We're driving the bus as much as it can be driven, right? As much as it can be driven. The bus can't make a U-turn, right? We got to keep going forward through this life. We don't have all the control of a bus, but what little control there is, it's in our hands. It's in our hands. And so, yes, I think we can practice with this is it and train ourselves to take just that little bit of emotional step back. And be like, wow, like if something happens later today that makes me really happy or really sad, I hope that I could remind myself that the most important thing I can do in that moment, that my Nhat Hanh, our teacher's name, means one action. That the one action that I want to call forth in that moment is that I be really present for what's happening. That I actually feel that anger, that I actually feel that sadness, that I experience my own life. And so this is it can sound very neutral, right? Like, oh, this is it. But it is not at all dismissive. It is the opposite. It is saying, this is it, another miracle. This is it, another incredibly blessed gift, another day of life. Yeah. A lot of things are like this, right? They can have a dark side and a very empowering side. They can have a side that we really don't like, and they can have a side that we couldn't live without. So let me close now with a couple of announcements. I'm so excited for next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Special thank you to all of you that will be watching this via recording all over the world. So happy to be practicing with you. Hope time zones and such allow for you to be here with us at Sangha Ocean Beach live on some Sunday from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, LA. I'm in San Diego, but internationally it's more called LA time. So, the recording of this will be sent out to everybody who's signed up soon, in the next day or two. So you have that to look forward to if you want to go back and review any of this. And thank you all so much for your donations so far. The suggested donation for the course was $40, and many of you have already donated, and some of you more than that, and I'm so grateful. Thank you as well for your patience. There was a problem with our credit card processor, and so for a couple days there, you could only donate via Venmo and PayPal, which I know is incredibly inconvenient for a lot of you, but that's been fixed. And there's a new donate box at the bottom of the course page, which is, I'll just drop it in the chat again. And we made it easy again. Thank you for your patience. And the last thing I'll say is please continue to spread the word. Whether people want to donate financially, or whether they want to donate by being here, or whether they want to donate by watching this in a recording afterwards and practicing it, we still receive that here at Sangha Ocean Beach as a precious and invaluable donation. That's why no one's ever turned away for lack of funds, and the donation is only suggested. What we care about is your practice. And so please continue to spread the word about next week and other teachings that are offered by Sangha Ocean Beach, which are also recorded. You can check all that out on my website, which is davekenneally.com. Thank you, my friends. We do it together, and I'm grateful for you.